Hello everybody and welcome to the 11th video in our series of videos on political developments in Ireland in the 20th century. Today we are going to look at the Irish War of Independence, which runs from 1919 up till 1921. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know when and how Sinn Féin set up their own government in Ireland. Secondly, you should know what was the main tactic of the Volunteers or the IRA and who did they target. And third, you guys should name two government responses to the increasing violence or attacks by the Volunteers and the IRA. As we mentioned in the end of our last video, the Sinn Féin party won a massive election in 1918 and were willing to use both parliamentary means and physical violence to achieve their goal of a republic. And these two strands, the violence and the politics, really characterized the War of Independence. We will look at the parliamentary side first. So Sinn Féin, as we mentioned, followed a policy of abstention, meaning that they would form their own government in Dublin and ignore Westminster. So on the 21st of January 1919, the 73 elected Sinn Féin politicians scheduled a meeting of the First Dáil in the Mansion House in Dublin. Only 27 could attend, as some of the elected representatives were in jail or still on the run after the conscription crisis, which we talked about the last time. They invited unionists and home rulers to join them in the Dáil, which they said was the legal government of Ireland, but both of them refused and took their seats in Westminster. With the First Dáil, Eamon de Valera was elected president. He was actually in jail when the First Dáil met in January and was freed from jail at Lincoln Prison in England thanks to the efforts of Michael Collins, who organised it. And when he came to the Second Dáil, actually in April of 1919, that's when he was officially named president. Arthur Griffith was named vice president. Michael Collins was named Minister of Finance. Countess Markovic, who we met before, was Minister for Labour. Cathal Brugha, who had helped re-establish the IRB and the Volunteers and the IRA with Michael Collins, was Minister for Defence, and W.T. Cosgrave was Minister for Local Government. So how did Sinn Féin take over the government? What Sinn Féin did was they started to take over all government business at local levels. They ignored the British courts and set up their own courts. They set up the very first courts in the first Sinn Féin courts was set up in May of 1919. They took over the running of the local government, and they were able to do these two things due to two factors. The first was that Michael Collins secured a Dáil loan to raise the government funds. The second was the physical force element of Sinn Féin's plan. This allowed them to enforce their new systems at a local level. It's said that the first shots of the War of Independence were shot on the 21st of January 1919, the same day as the First Dáil met. The attack happened at SOLOHEADBEG in County Tipperary, where the Volunteers, who were soon to be renamed the IRA, were led by a man named Dan Breen, and they ambushed an RIC, or the Royal Irish Constabulary, so this is the police force. They ambushed an RIC post in a weapons raid. 2 policemen were shot, dead and killed. This was the policy that the Volunteers or the IRA pursued. They targeted police officers, RIC men, in the first 18 months of the war. The majority of people killed were policemen and not British soldiers, with the police forced to take defensive positions in their localities. Sinn Féin were able to take over the courts and local government. The main tactic used by the IRA was guerrilla war tactics or hit and run tactics. Units like Dan Breen's unit in SOLOHEADBEG would form and they would carry out ambushes or attacks on local isolated RIC barracks in the countryside and then slip away with the ammunition and the guns from their raids. Munster and Dublin in particular were completely under Sinn Féin rule. The IRC and the army stationed in Ireland became more and more enraged by the guerrilla tactics and began reprisal or revenge attacks. In March of 1920, the RIC murdered the Lord Mayor of Cork, Thomas MACCURTAIN, in front of his family. His successor, Terence McSweeney, was arrested soon after, and he died on a hunger strike in Brixton Prison after 74 days on hunger strike. However, the British response was about to become a lot harsher, as in March of 1920 also we saw the arrival of the first units of the Black and Tans. They were called the Black and Tans due to their uniforms, which were a mixture of the black of the IRC uniforms and the tan of the army uniform. These were ex-soldiers who were recruited due to a shortage of RIC recruits. This was primarily due to the guerrilla tactics of the volunteers in the IRA. Next week we will be looking at some of the atrocities committed by the Black and Tans, and we will also be looking at the vicious, possibly even more vicious auxiliaries. These were ex-officers, so they had higher ranks than the soldiers, and these guys carried out some vicious reprisal attacks in Ireland. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know when and how Sinn Féin set up the government. So on the 21st of January 1919, you should know that they set up the government by putting in local, taking over local government, setting up their own courts and procuring loans. You guys should know that their main tactic of the volunteers in the IRA was guerrilla warfare or hit and run tactics, and their main target was the RIC. And you guys should name 2 government responses to the increasing violence. So that would be the introduction of reprisal attacks, the introduction of the Black and Tans, and the introduction of the auxiliaries. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.